Welcome everyone to the Legal Hour with Marty Tate. We'll give another few minutes for people to join us. Please hold on. Okay, Marty, welcome everyone to the Legal Hour with Marty Tate. I'd like to start this webinar by introducing Marty Tate from the law firm of Carmen, Lenoff, and Israelson. Before we jump into the questions this month, which you'll all be able to use your chat pad within the webinar and submit your questions as you have them. I want to ask Marty, how you doing? How's the last month treating you? Did you get a chance to enjoy the snow? You go out skiing?
Yeah, no, things are good. Thanks for asking. Snow has been good, except for it's 50 degrees today, so maybe that's good. I know that my wife's from Southern California, so she likes it, but I'd rather it just keep, dumping until March. But anyway,
the pros and cons of global warming.
Yeah.
Before we get into the questions, I also want to kind of allow our listeners a view into our conversation we're just having, and it's around the word crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, in my mind, is becoming quickly antiquated. I think several years ago, when the new guidelines just came out, crowdfunding took on its own life, where people who are raising capital every day, whether that's for real estate, VCs, businesses, oil and gas, all the different verticals of raising capital, they always thought crowdfunding was an island separate from what they were doing. And I think the realization that people are starting to have, and the appropriate realization, is crowdfunding is not this different island. It is simply leveraging the internet in your existing business. And the good news is that takes a lot of the mystique out of the equation, and now you're just talking about, well, what are the nuances of these new guidelines? The bad news is, for those that are waiting to jump into the crowdfunding waters, or basically waiting to leverage the solutions and tools available via the internet and the marketing capacities, etc., there's starting to, I think, become a little bit of separation between the adopters of the technologies and the laggers. Do you see that too, Marty?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. I was at a conference last week in San Jose, and as I was telling you, somebody brought up that question. He said, it's crowdfunding. He made that same point, basically saying it almost is taking on a negative connotation. I'm not sure if that's the case, but really, what I tell everybody that calls me, and I said, is that crowdfunding is it's this sort of loose term to just basically raising capital on the internet. I mean, there's not, it's so funny we get bogged down into what type of capital raise is it, but it's at the end of the day, it's really it's capital raising. It's securities laws. I think it was about a year ago, I was at another conference, and I was there with another prominent prominent attorney in this field, and we were we kind of joked and said, well, really all we are is we're just securities lawyers that just happen to be we just happen to be more up to speed on changing regulations. But I think even that sort of title is a little antiquated.
Well, you think about from the perspective of, because of the laws before the Jobs Act, it was illegal to use the internet as a marketing tool, right? And so there you have, as an industry, the capital raising industry who was barred by law not to use the internet. So it was one of the last industries affected by the internet revolution. But as I look at all the other industries that have been affected by the internet revolution, it's really clear to see with a high degree of probability what's going to happen in this industry as well. So whether you take the retail industry, you could ask JCPenney, Kmart, Sears, what their thoughts are the internet, right? As it relates to Amazon, eBay, Overstock, and all the other mini players that grabbed onto the internet early and often, and what those stories are. Or if you look at Orbitz in the travel agency world, you look at Uber in the transportation world. Every single time in the internet revolution, you have a group of established laggers. They've made tons of money, right? Sears, Kmart, tons of money in the 80s. tons of money in the 70s, but they chose to be laggards for whatever reason. Either they're unwilling or unable to incorporate the internet into their business. You now see 10, 20 years later the effects. So with a high degree of certainty, those who are in the raising capital industry right now, even though they may be the current leaders, if they are slow to adopt the internet, we could say with a great degree of accuracy their probability for success long term. But it also provides the opposite effect. Newcomers have this huge opportunity. If you're a master of the internet and raising capital, your trajectory or probability for success is exponentially increased because you have both expertise in the world's greatest marketing tool and also expertise in raising capital. And that's when, magic happens. And that's where I think people really need to clue into your long-term success will depend on your ability to A, execute your expertise in your own given field, whether that's real estate or startups or funding businesses, or in addition to expertise of the internet. How does the internet work? How do I find new clients? How do I find new investors? How do I market myself? How do I position myself? What is this thing called SEO? What is this thing called PPC? And before, historically, raising capital people didn't need to have or know those resources. They didn't hire those resources because they weren't allowed to. And now they're thrown into the fire going, market, set, go. And a lot of them I see still lagging to really incorporate that because, quite frankly, a lot of them are still making tons of money.
Yeah.
But, again, history will repeat itself in this industry like everyone else. And there'll be a day where, hey, our revenues dropped, we don't know why, and then suddenly once they figure it out, the cost of recovery is an astronomical cost that most people can't pay to survive.
Yeah. I have a couple, just to add to that, a couple of thoughts as you were talking. I was asked recently, there's a couple questions. One was, what is an ideal client in this space? And one of the answers I gave, one of the multiple answers I gave, is talking about people that are raising capital, especially on the real estate side. I'll get calls from guys that say, well, I do, we're a sponsor, a real estate development sponsor, we do syndications. I think that's a great client. That's a person that, like you said, they've been successful in doing what they're doing. They raise a lot of money for these real estate projects. And I think there's a lot of people that they're still just doing it that way. And I think a lot of those guys are going to be, quote unquote, the laggards. The guys that call and say, hey, we've been doing real estate syndication and we want to expand our reach, or we want to simply just make it more automated. We want to put it online so that rather than calling up people saying, hey, where's your check? Here's, let me email you a copy of the PPM and the subscription agreements. Those people that can put those aspects of their business online, they will, that's the next step for those people. And, it's similar for people that are raising capital for their businesses rather than, friends and family and hitting up people in the neighborhood. Do a campaign, do a 506c offering on a platform and raise capital there. The other point that you touched on was talking about, somebody asked a question recently, why haven't we seen the kind of growth in quote unquote crowdfunding that we expected, which I don't think that's true. On the real estate side, especially on the 506c accredited investor side, that business has been phenomenal.
Well, every single measure that's ever been put to the industry, crowdfunding, quote unquote, however they defined it, has exceeded their projections.
Yeah.
And so while people say, well, what's taking so long? It's what record are you expecting to shatter by how much before you agree that this is happening?
And I think a lot of that just comes from, and I don't even want to say a slow, but a more tempered adoption of, Reg CF, 4A6, unaccredited investor offerings. I don't know what people were expecting, but there has been growth in that. There has been, I think a pretty remarkable amount of capital that's been raised, and you are seeing successful offerings. I will say that, that there are some things that need to change in the regs, and hopefully that will, we'll see those coming up. But But even so,
we can make that statement 20 years from now.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something better, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be that tweak. Well, if we could only do that, if the government would ever only let us do this, there's always going to be that nuance. But the fundamental foundation of that is still the same. This is still a huge opportunity, even with the current regulation guidelines or deficiencies in certain areas of that. The floodgates are still open. The genie is out of the bottle, and it's not going back in.
No, and I think we'll see, speaking of that adoption, where you brought up, Amazon now. I mean, you think about it. If you need to buy almost anything, the first spot you go is you go and look online. You go look at Amazon, or you go look at one of these other retailers, rather than saying, well, I'm going to go down and go to the store, and I'm going to browse around. Now, there's still those...
There's specialty shops.
Yeah, there's specialty shops.
You don't have malls are closing, right? You already see the transformation that Amazon. And oh, by the way, how long did Amazon take to be big? Oh, several years.
It took a long time. Yeah.
And people forget that. They think, oh, Amazon's always been huge. No. And we're in that years of people are flying under the radar. They're not big yet. But that's what I'm saying is now the longer you wait, it's never good for you. It never pays off of, if we could only wait until Amazon got big to jump in to be their competitor. That's not when you want to jump in. You want to jump in when Amazon's small, not when Amazon's big.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. But I think that evolution will happen. We're probably said this before, but I don't think you have these massive amounts of people that are going to platforms right now or portals right now. Let's say, Reg CF portals and saying, where can I put my $10,000. Let me browse. It's still the companies that are successfully raising capital on those things either have established networks of customers or it's a local business. It's the amount of breweries and microbrew companies that are raising capital. Those are the ones that are being popular because A, they already have their customer support, and B, it's sort of a local thing. They can say, hey, we're going to rally around this, but that's not saying that's not coming, right? Eventually, I think you are going to see money managers. You're going to see investment advisors going and saying, hey, I put a portion of your capital, brokers, I put a portion of your capital into this company and this company and this company. And people are going to allocate a portion of their portfolios towards those investments. But I think that will happen. So give it time, I guess.
So here's a question. So in your opinions, equity crowdfunding is not off to a slow start. What's it going to take for the Joe Plumbers of the world to find out that they can now invest in early stage company funding? So I'll take a first swing at that.
Yeah.
To me, what's going to happen when Joe Plumber finds out is when Bill Carpenter just got a $100,000 return on his $10,000 investment. And Joe Plumber goes, hey, how did you get that extra $100,000 in your pocket? He said, well, I dropped $10,000 on this startup, and you could do the same. This is how you do it. Much like everything else is done today, it's basically word of mouth. So while for last year or two, and almost nearly last 6 months, we just started seeing the first wave of Reg CF. So how long do they have to wait before they get the first wave of winners? Knowing that many of the current investments will not all be winners, we have to still wait probably, 6 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months before we have that wave of winners where people go, hey, I stumbled across XYZ company 2 years ago and it finally paid off. That's when I think you're going to have a more viral, explosive adoption to everyday people searching for their next retirement income.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point in that they're again, we're only 8 months into Reg CF. Technically, none of those securities can even be sold. I mean, they have a 12-month restriction period before they can be sold, and even after that, there are additional restrictions on how those can be sold. Furthermore, there has to be markets for those. So yeah, the liquidity event, I think, is still, we're still a few years from now.
Never mind the liquidity. Even if I'm on paper, I invested in a company that was worth $100,000. It's now worth $20 million.
Yeah.
Hooray for me!
Yeah.
Right. I don't have to sell it to appreciate I made some good money.
Yeah.
But those stories haven't happened yet.
No,
You still have mostly accredited investors winning the game, and until you get the unaccredited investors winning the game, not just participating, but winning, I don't think you're going to have the viral effect that everyone's waiting for. But once you have that one breakout where everyone jumped into that Reg A Plus deal, everyone jumped into, and I think it's probably going to be more seen on the Reg A Plus because you're going to have larger pools of people that have clients, right? When you have established businesses that have, I'm familiar with a couple companies that have 100,000 clients, and they're looking to raise, several $1 million primarily from their client base. If that business continues their trajectory of success, you'll have 100,000 extremely happy clients because they're all early investors in that company that they've already loved, right? Yeah. And so why didn't I know about that company? Well, you didn't buy their product early,
sure,
and you weren't aware of it. But now you know the game because your sister, brother, or uncle did, and they're going to educate you on it.
Yeah. Well, you are, and in fairness, you are seeing success. People, especially on the real estate side, and the 506c accredited investor. Again, it's accredited investors, but they're seeing success. I mean, they're money's going full cycle and coming back and with great returns.
Yeah.
You're definitely seeing that.
The person paying Joe Plumber is seeing the success,
yeah.
But Joe Plumber has not yet seen it until Joe Plumber either A, responds to a marketing that is addressed to him that reaches his target demographic and compels him to go to a site to invest, or his acquaintance in his life, social circle, influences them to invest, and again, by what means. So once that happens, there is a level of education to the retail investor and adoption for the retail investor, and that usually comes upon success. Even Facebook, a phenomenally successful internet company, again, when you look at how long it took them to reach certain milestones, they were wildly popular in the college where they started, but even then it was several years before you actually had my mother create an account. Grandmas and grandpas, the non-internet savvy people. Now everyone that has a computer has a Facebook account. But for many years, it was the millennials, it was a certain demographic, and it didn't break out of that until there was a mass adoption. And so it's hard to predict when those thresholds or watershed moments happen, but we know it's coming. But again, once it happens, it's almost too late if you're not already in the game.
Yeah.
Because if your portal's not already up, they're already flooding to a portal that is.
Yeah. Now that being said, and I think for both of our sakes, I think we're still early. There still is room. We've talked about this. We're seeing specialization within portals and platforms, and I think that will continue to evolve. And I think that's sort of the next step. Maybe there'll be this sort of one-stop shopping.
I yet to see a 800-pound gorilla in the space.
Yeah.
And usually, if you look at other industries, there's usually space for 4 or 5 800-pound gorillas. I don't think our industry has one yet. There's some that have the potential, but I don't give them that much credit like, oh, you've arrived as an 800-pound gorilla. You potentially can get there. You might have a good start. And so to that, I advise most people, unless you have a lot of funding and a dynamic executive team, don't try and be an 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah.
That's a unique thing. There's plenty of money to be made in the niches, and that's what we're talking about, right? Where you could just own your niche, you're going to be phenomenally successful. I don't think you have to boil the ocean to be everyone's funding option from here and around the world with every jurisdiction, with every demographic. And I think you'd make yourself a huge disservice if you tried to attempt that. We have another question, and this one's our every webinar question. Do I have to be a broker-dealer, and do I need FINRA approval for Reg D?
No, you do not have to be a broker-dealer, and no, you do not need FINRA approval. I'm assuming you're saying to do to either be a platform or even to do a raise for yourself. No, you do not need approval for that. So can you use a broker-dealer? Sure, but do you need to? No.
And if I plan to get success, if I plan to take a commissions from the success of the raise, do I need to be a broker-dealer?
You either need to be a broker-dealer or you need to be working with a broker-dealer.
Yeah. So depending on your business model, it may require a license, such as a broker-dealer or a registered investment advisor. But if you're a direct issuer or you're running a marketing portal, so there's a couple questions. Are you doing a single raise and you're just doing that single raise as a direct issuer? You don't need a broker-dealer. If you're raising it for someone else, and it's a Reg D, and you're going to be commissioned on the success of that raise, then you need to be a broker-dealer, correct?
Yeah. Now that being said, Brent, the issue got brought up just recently with Brent. We've talked about this recently. There are certain states where the issuer agent or issuer dealer exemption doesn't apply. Typically, in the vast majority of states, issuers, if you're raising capital for your company, you do not need to be a broker-dealer. However, there are a handful of states that require registration of the issuer as what they're calling an issuer-dealer or issuer agent or representative. And that requires that you register with those states. Some states even require that you've passed certain examinations, but that's limited, and we can, I'm happy to talk through that issue with people if they have that question.
So we have another question. I'm from Mexico. What do I need to do to set up a crowdfund that will work in the USA too? So we have a foreign entity, let's assume, foreign offshore company that wants to take advantage of the money inside the U.S. and with the U.S. participation. So when do they have to, what rules do they have to play by, I guess is the first question.
So again, that goes back to how you're seeking to raise the capital. If you're trying to do certain regulations, certain exemptions or regulations are only available for U.S. or Canadian companies. So the first step would be to organize a U.S. company that could raise the capital. Now, if you're trying to be
like SPV or something more substantial?
Something more substantial. Well, certain exemptions aren't available for SPVs. So say for example, let me back up. If you're trying to raise, if you're a non-U.S. company that's trying to raise money under Regulation CF, so you're trying to raise less than $1 million, that is only available to U.S. companies. So you would have to have a U.S. subsidiary or entity available to, and it couldn't be under Reg CF. It couldn't be an SPV. It would have to be, an operating company. Now that being said, you could, a subsidiary of an operating company would be. Same applies for a Reg A offering. Now, if you're trying to be a funding platform, you're trying to raise money for, other companies, again, you'd want to be a U.S. company. Now, that being said, if you were compliant with, if you're a foreign issuer, foreign issuers can raise money under Reg D. You just have to comply with Reg D, and there's, additional requirements for foreign issuers.
Got it. So here's another question regarding Title III. Have there been any recent developments in Title III that you're aware of? We want some clarity around the blue sky laws. And again, do I have to be a broker-dealer? I could take the last one.
Okay.
For Reg CF, you have the option to be a broker-dealer, not required to be a broker-dealer. If you are a broker-dealer, you're held to the broker-dealer standards. If you're not a broker-dealer, FIN will give you the approval, but you're not held to those standards.
Yeah, and that's if you're trying to be a platform, right?
Title III, yeah.
Title III funding portal. Has there been any developments with regards to? There haven't been any official developments. But what you're seeing though is you're seeing a development in the way those rules are being applied. You're seeing developments in what people can do as far as marketing. You're seeing developments in that field. As far as blue sky as you know, this is a federal exemption from registration, so it basically preempts. If you're doing a 4A6 offering, then you're not required to comply with Blue Skies. Now I know that there are states that are trying to require certain that have had, I guess, issues with this, but as of today, the federal exemption still applies.
Gotcha. Quick question. So, in what scenario do I have to use a broker-dealer if my firm is not? Do I require FINRA approval for all offerings? So, obviously, the broker-dealer question's hovering there, right? There's a lot of people, primarily broker-dealers, that insist you have to use a broker-dealer, right?
Yeah.
And there's certainly an option, and then we talk about, and we say it every month, no, you don't, no, you don't, no, you don't, but we still acknowledge there's certain scenarios and cases where, yes, you do need to be a broker-dealer in those scenarios or cases. So in what scenario do I have to use a broker-dealer if I am not one? So, and then let's talk about the pros and cons of leveraging someone else as a broker-dealer. So I don't ever want to be one. What do I have to do to partner with or leverage someone else's license?
Okay. So what you'll see there, and I guess there's disagreement and different viewpoints on this, but sometimes it does make sense to use a broker-dealer, specifically like Brent said, if you believe that your marketing ability is limited or your customer base is limited, using a broker-dealer and leveraging their contacts, their clients, their customers, their networks might be beneficial. Almost certainly would be beneficial. That being said, it comes at a cost. Right?
Yeah, so let's pause right there. In my mind, there's the legal question, do I have to be?
Yeah.
And there's answers there. And then there's the question of, Brent, how do I get my deal to fund? And so I could tell you all day long, you don't need to be a broker-dealer,
yeah.
But it may be wise to associate with a broker-dealer if you think you'll have difficulty raising the capital yourself.
Yeah.
So while you can use the internet on certain guidelines to help you raise capital, if that is not already plugged in and working efficiently, I wouldn't put a huge dependency on that funding your first deal.
Yeah.
And so while we could say, no, you don't need this and no, you don't need that, you still have to ask yourself, well, how is my first deal or my 10th deal or my 20th deal going to fund? And just because I trust a broker-dealer doesn't mean it's going to fund with him either.
No.
And so these are big questions that the first thing you have to ask is, how are my deals going to fund? If I'm going to go to someone and say, I'll raise you the money, how are you going to raise it? So there is the legal question, what licenses do I need? But then there's the practical question of, how's this going to happen? And I think Marty's saying is, while you don't need to be a broker-dealer in many scenarios, leveraging a broker-dealer makes sense often for people who don't have the capacity to predictably fund them the deal themselves or their network of investors.
Correct. So then going back to the legal question of when do I need a broker-dealer, when do I, that really, and Brent, answered this earlier, it depends on your business model. How are you charging? If it's simply a listing fee and you're charging a flat fee to put deals up on your site, kind of a la Angels List or some of the real estate sites, then no, you don't need to be a broker-dealer. You're not taking a commission. But if you are planning on taking a commission, then you need to either be a broker-dealer or you need to be selling your securities through a broker-dealer. Now, how does that work? Because broker-dealers can't share commissions with non-broker dealers. The way that some people are working around that is the broker-dealer, the platform charges the broker-dealer a technology fee or a processing fee or something to that effect. Not bulletproof by any means, but it's definitely a workaround that people are using. So.
And then what about underwriting requirements for broker-dealers? So if I bring a broker-dealer into the deal, what am I even saying yes to? Do I have to use his paperwork? Who gets to set the rules? Does it become his deal in his world? Do I keep control? Do they keep control? Am I allowed to keep control if I negotiate that? When I bring a broker-dealer to the table, how does my world change?
Your world changes. It can change significantly. The broker-dealer, ultimately, again, it's your deal. but the broker-dealer will have a say in what that deal looks like. They, I know, for example, with a recent client doing a Reg A deal recently, we brought in a new broker-dealer, and they came in and they required that we change a bunch of, not only language in our offering documents, but we changed the substance of the deal. They also required additional legal opinions above and beyond what the company already had. So yeah, it can change, and it can, add an expense as well. Ultimately, but that is something that's negotiated. It's not like, you don't have to go with that broker dealer. You don't have to use them. It just becomes one of those things. You say, what can we live with, and what benefit are we getting out of bringing the broker dealer in versus what's it costing us?
Have you seen a typical deal? Just talking general typicals. If I am a issuer and I think I want to, or even a poor loaner, I want to leverage the use of a broker dealer, what should I expect in general to pay or compensate that broker dealer? What is the average broker dealer going to want from as far as commissions or piece of the deal in general?
I think you're going to look to spend anywhere between 6 to 9% of the raise. Typically, what you'll see is a commission on money that's raised, and then you have what's called a non-accountable expense. Basically, it's just an additional fee that they charge to quote-unquote cover their expenses.
Because I can.
Because they can. Yeah. And, broker-dealers are... I will say one thing right now is that there are not a ton of broker-dealers in quote-unquote this space, which is funny because it's going back to our first conversation. It's the same space.
Well, I think they're threatened by it, right? I say that in general. We have plenty of broker-dealer clients and that type of thing. I talk about, as I have interfaced with many broker-dealers over several years, I think, well, broker-dealers and non-broker-dealers, not like broker-dealers are the only ones that are a little hesitant to adopt or jump in, because if the rules change, and some people interpret the rules as I no longer need a broker-dealer to raise capital, so for certain lagging broker-dealers that's a threat to them. Other broker-dealers that are aggressive and smart, they see no threat to that guideline. And so, but again, that's not clarity as far as how do we fit in the space now or in the future. There's a lot of gray area, and as per the question every single month we have is, do I have to be a broker-dealer? Do I have to use a broker-dealer? And it keeps, and I think the FINRA coming out and managing the Reg CF and Reg Plus, I see broker-dealers are going to be around for a long time. There's a value there. They have relationships. They have establishment. And to ignore them, I think, would be a mistake. Although, again, putting a dependency on it or thinking I have to be this in order to have any level of success, I think, is also probably a little too extreme. So it's kind of, if they could help you propel your business forward, you should consider taking advantage of that. Yeah. But I don't think you need to associate yourself with one just to have a successful raise or be compensated appropriately.
Yeah, and where I was going with that is, I wouldn't be surprised, just like we see with other quote unquote service providers, is as more enter the field, I think you'll see more competitive. I'm hoping you'll see more competitive rates and commissions.
So if you have people looking for a broker-dealer, and you said there's not very many of them out there that are open to the online raising capital aspect of it, is there any recommendation you could give as to where they could find one?
Yeah. I mean, call me.
There you go.
There you go. And I'll,
And what's your phone number?
Yeah. 801-534-4435 or mtate@clilaw.com. And I can't remember, is there a link to my email on the webinar page or not? I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to make introductions. There's a few that I feel really comfortable with and that I really like. So
let's skip and talk about California law, which you may or may not be an expert in living here in Utah. But California apparently has restrictions on investment managers of retail buyer funds. No performance fee, waterfall, or promote allowed unless a qualified investors. Does this apply to real estate funds and minority shares in REITs? Okay. Does that make any sense to you in legal jargon?
It does. There's definitely a lot of legal jargon. That's a very loaded question. So California is not unique in that rule. Other states, Utah has that. Lots of states have similar laws regarding investment advisors. Typically, managers of funds, including managers of REITs, are required to, now again, it kind of depends on what type of fund, and because there are exemptions for fund, but let's just go to a real estate debt fund. Then, the area of law that comes into place is regarding investment advisors, and depending on the size of that fund, you may either have to register with the manager of that fund, either the general partner or the investment manager, may have to either register with the SEC or register with the state in which they're domiciled. And typically, managers or GPs earn two types of fees. There's a management fee, which is between 1% and 2% generally, and then a portion of the profit sharing or performance fee or carry, or whatever you want to call it, and that can be 10 to 25%. Is the typical model is 2 and 20. In order to receive that as an investment advisor, the rules generally require that you can only charge that performance fee to qualified clients, which is kind of a souped-up accredited investor. You have to have the net income and the net worth requirement is significantly higher. So to answer that question, its first answer is it depends on who you are, what you're doing. But generally, yes, if you are required to be an investment advisor, then yes, you are limited in the types of fees you can charge certain clients.
Thank you. So I know you're working with the SEC and FINRA all day for your clients. And this question comes, what critical items do the SEC and FINRA look for in their approvals for Reg CF and Reg A Plus applications? So what are the gotchas that you're seeing, I guess, right? It's like where do people have to be careful when they're navigating these waters of what are they really looking for? Because I've seen applications where 0 assets, 0 revenue, and they get approved, which is good, right? And so, well, what are they really looking for then in general? What if I'm a issuer or going to do a portal, what do I have to be really cognizant of to make sure I focus in the right areas?
So let's separate those two, because it's really completely different things and different pathways. With regards to Reg CF, the process there, it would be for the funding portal to be licensed as a funding portal. The SEC basically is punted to FINRA to regulate that. FINRA, the issues that I'm seeing people get hung up on is who is their escrow provider. I've yet to take that through where there hasn't been questions about that, where they haven't looked under the trunk with who is the person that's holding those funds. And that seems like that's been one of the biggest hurdles. The second thing that we're seeing is that we're getting pushback on how are you marketing, what are you saying on your site, that they're basically coming back and they want to make sure that there's not any sort of promotional,
inappropriate
promissory, anything like that. But those are typical. And then really, FINRA wants to make sure that the technology complies with the regs. They want to make sure that as you go through, that there's a spot for comments or for.
So everything that comes standard with the CrowdEngine solution,
exactly.
they need to make sure is there.
Yeah, that was my next pitch, is that CrowdEngine has you covered there. So that's the one side. Now on a Reg A Plus, that's all the SEC, and with FINRA weighing in on your 5110 for if you're using a broker dealer or not. But the majority of the process is with the SEC. So what are you seeing on that? It's basically the same pushback that you'd get on any public offering. They're going to want to make sure that the disclosures are adequate. They're going to drill down. They're going to go through your offering circular, every bit of it, to make sure that you are compliant with the rules. They want to make sure that they want to understand who you are, how you're going to sell it. A lot of questions around the plan of distribution, how you're going to sell this security, how you're going to raise your capital. And if you're using a broker-dealer, that brings up more questions. How are they paid, and so forth. So
appropriately so. They're looking to protect the unaccredited investor, right?
Exactly.
They're not so worried about the accredited investor, but especially the unaccredited investor. Now that they have this floodgate open to all unaccredited investors, they want to make sure anything that's going to go in front of them is appropriate and not out of line with where it should be.
Yeah, and it's when Reg A Plus was passed, the sort of the mandate to the SEC was, hey, this is supposed to be a streamlined review. It's not supposed to be as extensive review as you would get on an S1, which is or an S3, a typical public offering document. I have not seen that, and other attorneys I've talked to in this space have similar experiences. Really, the same people that are reviewing the 1A, are the same people that review S1s, and they're not treating them much different. Now, the amount of disclosure you have to provide in a 1A is less than you'd provide in an S1, but the review is the same. And then really, I'm not seeing anything that's like this is something that they're really focused on, because
so far it's been relatively appropriate and common sense where their focus is, where their focus should be.
Yeah, but it's still a process. I mean, I think that anybody that's expecting, hey, we file this and within 30 days we're approved, I think it's a process. The SEC, their job is to try to poke holes in it. I've had comment letters with 20-something comments, and I've had some that have had 6. So it's just and there's really not there's some things that is on the one with the 20-something, you can look and go, okay, yeah, I think we could have dealt with that better, but that their job is to poke holes in things. So
here's another BD question. If you have a BD, how would you structure the portal? Would you set it up as a division of the BD, a subsidiary, or an affiliate? Or is it even required to have a BD? Do you have to have it set up differently? One
thing that I'm seeing is the portal being set up, or the platform set up, portal set up and owned by an entity, and then you're seeing the securities, the broker-dealer basically contracting, even if they're an affiliate, contracting with that platform to sell the securities. So, and you'll see.
What's the advantage of that, just high level?
Just separating liabilities, so that if somebody sues the portal,
you're not suing us.
You're not suing the broker.
Unless you have a good lawyer, you're going to sue everyone.
Yeah, but they're trying to separate liability, and typically what you'll have is in those contracts between them, you'll have indemnification that protects the broker-dealer. That's the way that I think they would prefer to have that set up.
If you have a Reg CF portal or a Reg A Plus, in doing Reg A Plus, give us some insight of what is the paper load, the application load to fill out for both the issuer and or the portal owner. How much? There's obviously paperwork to get approved by Reg CF, but ongoing after that official wave of paperwork, what am I expected to complete or fill out ongoing for Reg CF deals? And what am I supposed to? What paperwork do I need to fill out for Reg A Plus deals? And how much is that? Is that 1 page, 50 pages, 1 week's work?
So again,
how big is this wave?
Yeah. Let's think about it. Because again, very different. One's a registered offering, and one is an exemption. Once a portal is approved by FINRA, there's ongoing compliance with FINRA that is, I don't want to say minimal, but it's not significant to make sure that you remain current there. Obviously, for your issuers, they have to file Form C when they do an offering. Form C, Reg CF also requires those issuers to provide regular reports. You have to do updates, you have to do an annual report, and so forth. It's not quite public company reporting, but it's in accordance to their the forms there. So the issuers, again, not the portal, but the issuers have those ongoing obligations. Similar rules apply to Reg A offerings. Once the Form 1A is filed, you have to file an update. They're similar to public company filings, but not as frequent. But basically, anytime there's a change in certain things having to do with the offering, you have to amend it. If there's an update to the company to certain delineated aspects, you file what's called a Form 1U, which is an update, and then you have to do semi-annual and annual reports that are similar to a 10K or a 10Q, I guess.
Great. So let's talk about raises. And so if I did a Reg CF raise, how soon could I do another round? So I got my seed money for my Reg CF, right? Hooray, hooray. I got my, let's just say $800,000, right? I burned through that because I'm a fast-growing company and I needed to raise more money. What limitations do I have on my next round? How soon could I have it, and how much could I raise subsequently?
So, again, you're limited to $1 million on a rolling 12-month basis under Reg CF. Is that the?
Yes, Reg CF.
I want to make sure that I'm
Reg
answering
CF.
that correctly.
So let's just say $1 million. We raised it in the month of February this year.
Great.
So let's keep it simple, so we don't have this $200,000 floating out there. We raised all $1 million. We burned through it just as fast.
Yeah.
Now what?
So you could not do another Reg CF offering until a year after that point, so February of next year. However, you could do a 506C offering, a 506B offering. You could do a Reg A offering. Yeah.
How quickly? Immediately?
So let's say you closed in February. Yeah, if you went out and started to do a 506C offering, in May, you could do it then. I mean, you could start your 506C offering. The nice thing is a 506C, now where you have to sort of put some space and try not to make sure you're not integrating is if you're doing a 506B, you're doing a private offering. That's where you would want to make sure that you had closed out your Reg CF offering. And I get this question. I had a client right now that's doing a Reg C offering, and they said, well, we have some private investors that want to come in, completely aside from the Reg CF deal that's still active. They said, these guys are just people we're talking to, and they want to put money into our company. Now, as long as they're accredited investors, they could still fall under the exemption of 506C because you are there is a general solicitation. Now, if they're non-accredited investors, they either have to come in the Reg CF door, or they don't come in at all until you're done with that offering and you put some space. I mean, and there's not a bright line. But, I would say 3 months, 60 to 90 days, and then before you bring them in. The problem is you have to make sure that it doesn't look like they were solicited through this offering over here and then brought in through a back door.
Gotcha. So what I heard you say is you could in theory do a Reg CF deal starting February 1st in parallel have a 506C offering at the same start date, and I could channel my accredited investors to my 506C deal, so it doesn't take the $1 million away from my retail investors. So if I have a large group of retail investors, I want to reach out and basically save my $1 million for my clients, and then my big swinging investors I have on my 506C. That's a potential solution for companies in that scenario.
Yeah, and that's it's possible to do those. Again, I think the key is you have to think about how the other thing to think about is how you're advertising, because with respect to a 506C, where you could get into trouble is with a 506C, you're really not restricted in how you can advertise, what you can say, whereas with the Reg CF you are. So you have to make sure that
you play by Reg CF rules.
Exactly.
So you don't violate your Reg CF rules by having a parallel offering with the 506C rules. So you're going to have the higher standard of the marketing limitations, so you don't violate your Reg CF as you're promoting your Reg D.
Correct.
Clear as mud.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thank you for that insight. That's great. Under Reg A Plus Tier 2, issuer doesn't need to do certain filing if there's less than 300 shareholders. Could you tell me what the filing issue could be to exempt from? Under Reg A Plus Tier 2, an issuer doesn't need to do a certain filing if the issuer has less than 300 shareholders. Are you familiar with that guideline?
So,
can you tell me what the filings are, what the filings the issue would be?
So if they have less than 300 shareholders, then the ongoing reporting requirements are not required.
Gotcha.
So you wouldn't have to file a Form 1K, which is your annual report, or a 1A, which is your 1SA, which is your semi-annual report, or your 1U, which is your current reports. So that's if you have less than 300 shareholders.
Gotcha. One more question. So is Reg CF the primary offering that has the heavy marketing solicitation stipulations? Let's go into, we kind of, at the last point we made, we kind of went into that marketing definitive. Let's expand on that to clarify for people that may not be familiar with the Reg CF marketing guidelines versus the 506C Reg D marketing guidelines. So there's more clarity. And even Reg A Plus, I get a lot of questions on what can I say? What can I say? Could I say this in Reg A Plus? Could I say this in 506C? So let's start with which offering types have marketing stipulations. We're not going to. Let's include 506B, even though it's going to muddy the waters a little. So you have 506B. Can you market a 506B offering?
No. Well, you can't have a general solicitation, so no, you cannot.
No.
You cannot mark. I mean, you can.
You can market the portal, right? But you can't market the deal, to my understanding. Is that correct?
Correct. So yeah, you could market the portal, and there's a lot of real estate platforms that do this. So you can market the platform itself. You can't market the deal itself.
You can market the business. You can't market the products inside the doors.
Yes, exactly.
So now we have come to 506C. Are there any marketing limitations you have to be careful of when promoting a 506C offering?
You really can't. You really can do just about anything. You just can't be fraudulent, misleading. You can't have a material omission.
Could you claim returns?
You generally shouldn't claim returns. I don't want to say you can't.
Speaking with a lawyer.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't claim returns. You should never use the word "it's guaranteed." I mean, I have a list of words that you should never use. So anything. I mean, we talked about anything a graph that shows returns going up. Be careful of those type of things, and those are just those are more from a protection standpoint. You just want to make sure that you're not saying anything that would be intentionally
misleading. If the deal was to go south, and these marketing materials appear 2 or 3 years later saying, look at the trajectory I invested in, and it's been the opposite since then. I made this investment on that claim. Yeah. That's when you start to feel the squeeze, right?
Yeah.
Because you showed me an arrow going straight up, the arrow went straight down, you misled me.
Yeah, exactly. So, and those are pretty common sense things. So, but with regards to a 506C, really there just aren't limitations as far as, what you can, other than what we just talked about, what you can say or how it's said. With respect to a Reg CF deal, and the thing about, with a 506C, you can, because there's not a filing point, you can start that immediately. You just have to make sure, what I would always include is in any sort of advertising, any sort of marketing, that you have a disclaimer, that lovely language at the bottom that basically says that it's not an offering to sell securities, and everything is basically qualified by the material found in the offering memorandum. So refer them to your disclosure materials or offering memorandum. With respect to a Reg CF, you are limited in what you can say. You basically, you can't say anything before the deal's live, other than, maybe some private conversations, but you can't.
You can't have a marketing campaign.
No.
You can't launch something on Google or Facebook or anything else. It does not exist until it's live.
Yeah, until it's live. I've even had questions, well, can we really ramp up our marketing efforts prior, or just product marketing efforts, or just our company branding before the offering? I think you're on thin ice there, because they basically would say you're conditioning the market. You really, even though you're not offering anything, you're preparing to offer. So that's a sort of a slippery slope that I know that an area that people are playing in a little bit. Once you filed your Form C and the offering's live, it's on the portal, you are limited, and basically you can say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is the terms of our offering, this is what we're selling, it's debt, it's equity, whatever it is, and this is where you can, this is the price, and this is where you can find out more information about it. That's really all you can say. Or you can say nothing really at all and just say, we're super cool.
So what about forecasted financials? Are those claims? Like, how do you do a forecasted financials and not make claims of success?
You just, qualify the heck out of them and say, these are, these are projections only, and take them with a grain of salt. The last question you asked is about Reg A. Reg A does allow you to test the waters, so you can go out and seek indications of interest. You can get people to say, yes, I'm in, basically non-binding indications of interest or commitments to that offering. Anything you do to sort of test the water, so any pre-marketing needs to be filed as part of your 1A and needs to be included in that offering as an exhibit. And then once the deal is live, you need to make sure that whatever you're saying out there in your marketing campaign matches with what's already in your offering circular. The example I gave to a client recently is you don't ever want, it's presumed that all of, this is again just for a Reg A offering, it's presumed that every investor is reading your offering circular. It's not presumed that they're reading everything else. So whatever else you say, any marketing piece, it needs to match with the circular, because you can say, well, an investor could claim, well, you said in this, in this webinar that, you guys were releasing a new product, or that you guys had this new contract or whatever. If that's not in that offering circular, it's not presumed that everybody's heard it. And somebody can say, well, I didn't know that. I would have invested had I known that. Or I wouldn't have invested had I known that. So you have to make sure all of your marketing materials match what's in your offering circular.
So what about portals that have key influencers or experts, and they go, we like this deal, or this portal's going to give it an investability score of 27 out of 30, or 3 stars out of 5, or there's some type of rating system done by either the portal owners, or influencers on the portal that say they're giving it some stamp of approval, like that is influencing investment. So it's not potentially coming from the issuer, but it does influence the investor's mindset because, hey, they gave it 4 stars out of 5 that this is a good investment. Is there liabilities there, and who's holding the bag?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things you have to consider. One is, if they're being paid by the issuer to be an influencer, that needs to be disclosed. Under Reg CF, it's really clear. That has to be.
So if you're paying the portal, then in their affiliate with the portal, then that gets muddy really fast.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd have to identify that. And the portal, especially the portal, that raises a whole other issue, because then you're promoting a deal. You look like an investment advisor,
or a broker
dealer, or whatever. Yeah, especially depending on how you're being paid and so forth. That being said, I know a lot of the portals, you'll see them say what they like about the deal. You'll see, one of their experts say, this is why we like this company, or why we selected them. That's okay as long as that's being done across the board. Any sort of thing that says, hey, we're giving this investment a 5 stars and we're giving this one a 2, you're not only curating the deal, which is, semi-okay, but you're promoting a certain deal and you're acting like an investment advisor rather than just a funding portal.
So one last thing before it goes, what about 506C and Reg S? Can you combine and offer a 506C and Reg S? So what's it? Talk about that for a moment.
So and I actually do this you see this quite frequently, is that 506C is just we've talked about what that is, accredited investors only general solicitation. Reg S is an exemption for non-U.S. persons. So a lot of times you'll see, hey, this offering is being conducted under Reg D, 506C, Reg D, and Reg S. The issue there is, so that allows non-U.S. persons to invest. There's not any sort of restriction on on general solicitation. The biggest issue is that they have to be non-U.S. persons. So and they have to make those representations that they are. There's some other hoops they have to jump through, as well as their securities they receive are restricted and can only be resold in accordance with Reg S. But you see that all the time, a concurrent 506 Reg S offering.
So thank you everyone for participating. Before we go, Marty, could you give your phone number one more time? There's been a couple of requests since then of, hey, I want Marty's phone number again.
Yeah, it's 801-534-4435, and my email is mtate@clilaw.com.
Thank you, Marty, for a great webinar again.
Yeah,
Look forward to
Marty.
talking to you next month. If anyone else has any other questions or would like to continue the dialogue with me, you could reach me at my office, 801-556-4609. Thank you and have a great day.